Silence can be beautiful. It can be the pause that clears the noise, right? Or the stillness that allows us to hear what we're thinking. It can be the space that gives us room for thinking and reflecting. And in a world that's constantly loud and where there are voices competing for our attention and opinions that are endlessly clashing, it can be like this refuge where wisdom begins. But silence can also be a mask. It can look like peace while we're hiding fear. It can feel like stillness, but actually be more suppression. Sometimes I think we keep quiet not because we're calm, but more so because we're terrified. And so we swallow our words and we bury our truth and we disguise fear as maturity. And while this might appear noble on the outside, on the inside it's corroding intimacy. Because intimacy cannot exist where truth is absent. See, suppression masquerading as silence is one of the easiest traps for us to fall into. So we tell ourselves, I don't want to cause any conflict, or I don't want to make it worse, or I'll just stay quiet. And for a while, this seems to work. The waters stay calm, the conversation ends without any arguments, everyone moves on. But beneath the surface, resentment is growing. The words that we don't say echo inside of us, and the connection that we long for withers under this weight of what was never spoken. And the truth is, a silence without integrity isn't stillness, it's suffocation. Integrity insists that our inner truth must align with our outer actions. And when we're silent, but we're carrying these unspoken angers and disappointments and fears, we're living divided. And that division is eating away at us. It isolates us because no one can truly know us if we never allow our voice to be heard. Young men in particular are often taught to confuse suppression with strength. And from an early age, many of us, we hear, be strong and don't complain and don't show weakness. And so we learn to swallow our emotions and we bite back our words and we stand in silence as if silence itself makes us men. But suppression doesn't really make us strong. It makes us numb. And numbness is not the same as resilience. See, I've lived this myself. Like I've had it where there are moments I kept quiet, not because I had peace, but because I was scared. Scared of being rejected, scared of being misunderstood, scared of disrupting the fragile comfort of that moment. And in those moments, I told myself I was being wise, I was being patient, I was being mature. But the truth was I wasn't practicing wisdom, I was practicing fear. And fear always disconnects us. And the irony is that the silence of suppression, it doesn't actually protect relationships. I think it more so undermines them. Because when I hide my truth, the other person cannot connect with me. They can only connect with this version of me that I've edited to keep things smooth. And that version is not real. It's a shadow. It's a mask. And over time, that mask will become exhausting to wear. And the intimacy that we hoped to preserve really collapses under the weight of what was unsaid. Stillness, by contrast, is different. Stillness is not fear, it's presence. Stillness is the space where we create a zone for listening, to reflect, or to breathe. It's the moment that we pause before responding, not to suppress, but to bring words into alignment with our values. I think stillness strengthens intimacy because it makes space for honesty, whereas suppression weakens intimacy because it replaces honesty with absence. And the challenge then is learning how to tell the difference between those two. Is my silence an act of fear, or is it an act of wisdom? Am I staying quiet because I'm centered, or or because I'm afraid. See, one deepens a connection and the other one just erodes it. And the difference is really measured by integrity. Integrity always will ask, am I hiding or am I holding? Am I aligning or am I avoiding? One of the clearest signs to me that silence has become suppression is the presence of resentment. See, when silence is rooted in stillness, it produces peace. Whereas when silence is rooted in fear, it produces bitterness. And you walk away from that moment feeling unsettled, carrying the weight of the words that you didn't actually say. And that weight does not vanish. That weight hardens, and eventually it leaks out into sarcasm, into passive aggression, and oftentimes it just explodes with this disproportionality to that situation. See, suppression never stays hidden. It always surfaces. And when it does, it damages the intimacy more than honesty ever could. Because honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, builds trust. Whereas suppression just breaks it down. It communicates to the people around us that we will not show up fully, right? That our real selves will remain, in essence, hidden behind this curtain of politeness or fear. And no one can truly stay connected when what needs to be said is hidden. I think young men especially fall into this pattern. Silence feels much safer, right, than honesty. To speak what we really think or feel seems risky. I mean, what if it makes us look weak? What if it causes conflict? What if it changes how people see us? And so we swallow it. We tell ourselves that our silence is maturity, when in fact, it's really just avoidance. But avoidance does not create peace, does it? It just creates this distance, if you will. And there's a reason why intimacy thrives on truth. Truth, even when it's messy, it brings everything into open so that we can face it together. Suppression, on the other hand, it just distorts reality. It says everything is fine when everything isn't. And it pretends that connection is strong when in reality it's just fragile. And that distortion is dangerous because it leaves everyone operating in an illusion rather than in reality. Integrity, though, calls us back to honesty. And in essence, it reminds us that silence should never be a mask. Silence should really be a choice that's rooted in presence, not in fear. Integrity asks us to align our inner life with our outer actions, right? Am I carrying anger? Then integrity means I'm finding the courage to name it respectfully. If I'm hurt, integrity says acknowledge it instead of pretending that I am unaffected. If I'm uncertain, integrity calls me to admit that uncertainty is there rather than hiding behind this facade of calm. See, I've learned that suppression often feels easier in the moment, but it will cost more in the long run. The conflict that we avoid today will become the distance that we feel tomorrow, in essence, right? And so we can have this wall between us and people that we love. And over time, that wall gets higher and thicker until intimacy really feels impossible. Stillness, by contrast, though, it doesn't build walls. Stillness builds bridges. Stillness allows space for reflection so that when you do speak, your words are rooted, and they're rooted in truth. And stillness honors both the relationship and yourself as well. Suppression doesn't honor either of those. Suppression is just more so absence dressed up as peace. And for young men, this distinction is crucial. Too many of us, I think we've been taught that silence itself is strength. But strength isn't the absence of words, though. Strength is really the alignment of truth and courage. And real men don't suppress their voices. Real men actually learn when to pause in the stillness and when to speak up. Both are necessary, and both of those require integrity. So the question isn't whether silence is good or bad. The question is really whether our silence is chosen or if it's forced. Is it rooted in presence or is it being driven by fear? See, if it's chosen, it becomes stillness. If it's driven by fear, I think it becomes more suppression or a vice. And that difference determines whether our relationships will deepen or disintegrate. There's another sign too that silence has really slipped into suppression. And that's when it becomes habitual. See, at first, keeping quiet might feel like a one-time decision. And so you bite your tongue in one conversation, or you avoid conflict in another one. But over time, suppression becomes a pattern. And it becomes like your default mode. Instead of asking, should I speak up? You assume that silence is just the safest option. And here's the danger. When suppression becomes a habit, it shapes identity. And so you start to believe that your voice does not matter. And you convince yourself that others don't want to hear your truth. And slowly you disappear. You're physically present in the relationships, but emotionally you're absent. And people may think that they know you, but they only know the version of you that fear has allowed them to see. See, this is devastating for intimacy, I would say, because intimacy requires courage of exposing ourselves. It requires us, in essence, to bring our full self to the table, right? Our beliefs, our feelings, our doubts, our convictions. And without that, there may be civility, yes, but there will never be closeness. Whereas suppression replaces authenticity with performance. And performance can never really sustain intimacy. See, I've walked this road myself where there were seasons in my life where silence became my safety net. And I thought that I was avoiding rejection. But what I was really doing though was I was rejecting myself first. I thought that I was preserving the peace. But what I was really doing was I was burying conflict under layers of fear. And every time I chose suppression, I felt more distant, not only from others, but also from myself. And that's the hidden cost of suppression. It fractures on the inside of us. Integrity is about alignment, about living with our inner values matching our outer actions, right? The suppression is what destroys that alignment. It forces us to betray our own voice and to live divided. And a divided self cannot sustain intimacy because intimacy requires wholeness. Stillness, by contrast, it brings integration, right? When I choose stillness, I pause not to erase myself, but rather to gather myself, to allow my emotions to settle and my thoughts to clarify and my words to align. Then when I do speak, I'm speaking with integrity. And that kind of silence is what really strengthens a connection because it prepares the way, if you will, for honest dialogue. Suppression will weaken a connection because it really avoids the dialogue altogether. And for young men, this is a battle worth naming. Many of us, we've learned very early that speaking up was dangerous. And maybe when we expressed pain, we were told to man up. And maybe when we were expressing fear, we were told, toughen up. Maybe when we shared a vulnerability, it was met with mockery. And so we learned to stay silent, and we learned to swallow our truth and to protect ourselves by disappearing. But protection at the cost of presence is not protection at all. That's isolation. Real courage is not about never being afraid. Real courage is about speaking, even when fear tells you to stay silent. It's about trusting your voice and that your voice has value, even if it risks being misunderstood. And believing that intimacy is really worth the discomfort of truth. Because without truth, there is no intimacy. There's only performance, right? Now, the path forward is to begin by reclaiming our voice, not recklessly, but intentionally. Not blurting everything, but choosing honesty over absence. To, in essence, practice stillness when it helps us to align, but rejecting suppression when it tempts us to disappear. That's how we begin to live with integrity, and that's how we begin building intimacy. The tragedy, if you will, of suppression is that it masquerades as strength while it quietly drains our life of any connection. And we may look composed, we may look calm, but inside we're absent. And absence is not intimacy. People really cannot bond with a version of us that we keep locked away. They can only bond with the voice that we bring into the open. This is why integrity demands that we face our silence honestly. And we need to ask, is this stillness or is this suppression? Am I choosing presence or am I just avoiding fear? These questions matter because they determine whether our silence is going to heal or harm. Stillness creates room for intimacy, whereas suppression just erases it. Stillness is rooted in courage, whereas suppression is rooted in fear. And young men especially, we must reclaim this difference. The world does not need more men who disappear behind the silence in the name of strength. The world needs men who are willing to speak their truths with respect, even when it feels risky. And it needs men who can actually pause in that stillness when needed, but who also know that their voice matters. Because intimacy only grows when voices are heard. Here at Uber Vintagers, this conviction fuels everything that I do. My mission is to call men into lives of integrity and intimacy, where silence is no longer used as a mask for fear, but more so as a tool for reflection, where men can tell the difference between stillness and suppression, and where courage replaces avoidance. Because real strength is not found in disappearing. It's found in showing up. And here's where the road we're on is pointing to as far as what's coming next. See, all of these themes, the differences between silence and suppression, tolerance and conviction, right? Forgiveness or bypassing, all of these contrasts are really preparing the groundwork for the framework that I'm calling the 764 movement. And it's a way of naming the patterns that hold us back and the pathways that lead us forward. A way, if you will, of helping us see when what looks like virtue is really fear in disguise. Soon, we'll be unpacking that together in full next month. But for now, the question is this: will our silence be a choice that's rooted in stillness, or will it be fear hiding in plain sight? The answer matters because intimacy cannot grow in the shadows. It only grows where there is light and honesty and presence. So let's choose presence. Let's choose courage. Let's choose the stillness that prepares us to speak truth, not suppression that hides us from it. That's where integrity lives, and that's where intimacy really begins. Thanks for listening to this episode, friends. Let me know in the comments how this landed with you. I'd love to follow up and see how it resonated and any insights I may have missed. See you in the next episode.